There are rising calls to end the 30% matric pass rate in South Africa. One SA movement leader, Mmusi Maimane, started a petition which has gained more than 1,500 signatures and counting. He says it hurts the education system and is detrimental to pupils. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Basic Education Department spokesperson Mhlanga. Elijah, many thanks for your time this morning. Just give us an understanding of this 30% pass rate and what it exactly means for a pupil who will be leaving school and trying to get into an institution of higher learning.
Well, good morning, Ropiwa. Well, to start with, there is no such thing as a 30% pass rate. There are many things here that need to be explained. The first one is that people confuse what is supposed to be called a pass mark to a pass rate. So a pass rate is something else. That is the aggregate result of the learners in the country as announced by the minister to say in this year, the pass rate of the class of 2021 is the following. That's what we're talking about, and that's a separate issue altogether. It shouldn't even come to this discussion. But what I think you want to talk about are the pass requirements for the National Senior Certificate. Well, I heard you in your introduction, you were mentioning the name of Mmusi Maimane. You see, the unfortunate thing about Mmusi Maimane is that he is showing his lack of understanding of the basic education system in the first place, and secondly, the pass requirements in particular. He's talking about the 30% pass mark syndrome. There's no such thing. If you look at the pass requirements, there are different levels to it. We have a bachelor admission pass, we have a diploma admission pass, as well as a higher certificate admission pass. And across all those, you've got different levels. You've got to achieve in different ways. For example, for a bachelor pass admission, you need to have at least 40% in your home language, and then 450 and above achievements, and then at least 30% in one or two other subjects. So that's the bachelor. And for a diploma, you also need to obtain at least 40% for home language and 40% as well in other subjects. But you also need 50% and at least 30%. So there is no one number, and there's never been one number that has been used as a so-called pass mark for subjects. It's a combination of different levels of achievement that you need to have obtained for you to be able to get that matric certificate. And we perhaps need to understand why we issue a matric certificate. The certificate is issued to a candidate who has met all the requirements so that they're able to leave school. It's a school leaving certificate. But based on your achievement, on your level of achievement, you should then be able to access university studies either at a bachelor level or a diploma level or a higher certificate level.
So, Elijah, where does this debate then come from? And it's not the first time that this notion of a 30% pass mark has to be changed by the Department of Basic Education. It's been a debate that's been ongoing for a while. And so just based on what you've explained in terms of the different requirements that you would need to obtain a matric certificate so you can move on to institutions of higher learning, what is the debate then centered around?
It's actually baffling to even contemplate where the confusion comes from. But I suspect that most of us were forgotten that by 1994 we had 19 different education systems in this country, each with its own requirements. Come democracy, 1996, the South African Schools Act come into play. It then unifies the systems into a single one. And since then, the system has been evolving. And in the past, well, in my time, in my day, as someone said, we had something called higher grade. You also had a standard grade, and you also had a lower grade. And those things were phased out. From 2008, we had what we now call the National Senior Certificate with its own pass requirements, and those are the ones that I've explained. So that background is important. So when the higher grade and standard grade were phased out, we started using new terminology. And the terminology said bachelor, diploma, and high certificate. perhaps some messaging was lost there during that transition, and people thought that there was a lowering of standards. There's no lowering of standards. All you need to do is to look at your certificate. It doesn't matter when you wrote matric or grade 12 or standard 10, as it was called in many different names in the past. Just look at it and see what the minimum pass was for different subjects. So it's conditional. In other words, if you get 30% for all the subjects, you fail, because the requirements are very clear that at home language level, you need to achieve at least 40%. And it requires another 40% somewhere else. So what we need to understand is to say, what do these different figures mean? Because our insistence that there's 30%, it doesn't really make sense because it's not there. And we should really stop. And Mmusi Maimane must also stop trying to reboot his political career by misleading people and getting people co-opted in this misguided campaign to try do something that is educationally sound in terms of education systems in South Africa and around the world.
Yeah, let's speak about the education system then, Elijah. I mean, we've had COVID over the last 2 years, which has disrupted every single way in which we do things. Is the Department of Basic Education confident that the system is producing sufficient pass rates? Well, not just the pass rate, but rather educated young people who are able to enter the higher education learning system. Are you confident in the programs and the system that you've created as the Department of Basic Education, and that the disruption of COVID has not been severe on what learners are getting out of the school system?
Okay, there are two parts to that question. The first one is whether the South African education system is able to produce young people who are able to cope with university. The answer is absolutely yes. And the reason is that it's not only entry into the South African higher education system that our young people are able to access, but they're also able to study overseas. We have hundreds of young people who are studying in Russia, in China, UK, US, and any other part of the world, by the way, after having passed in this country through this current basic education system. They're able to cope there. Some are in Cuba and others are in other places in specialized areas, having passed there, which means the standard of the education here equips the young person to be able to cope anywhere in the world. So that's the first part. The second part is whether COVID has had a negative impact. Yes, it has, because education has not been the same since March 2020, when schools were forced to close. You remember that there was a time when there was no movement whatsoever, and our young people had to stay at home, but we were able to work in the system to try to recover that time. Class of 2021, well, they were a little bit fortunate in that in 2021, there were no disruptions. They were in school from day one right to the end. And we were also able to provide support to them using different tactics such as camps and other remote learning strategies that we put in place. And although they came from a deficit of 2020, where as grade 11 class, they did not finish the curriculum, but we worked so hard last year to provide support to them so that they are able to face the exam with confidence. And we believe that they would have done all they could to make sure that they perform at the highest level. And the results, the minister will announce on the 20th, and they will collect their own statements of results on the 21st of January. Everyone will see the efforts that the learners, the teachers, and officials in the system have put. Of course, let's not forget the parents and communities who rallied behind the class of 2021.
Absolutely. Basic Education Department spokesperson Elijah Mhlanga, many thanks for your time this morning. Just breaking down this 30% pass mark that's been debated for several years now, debates around whether the threshold should be changed, so providing some clarity around details on that.